Grit is not a mystery. It is not a gift reserved for the elite. It is not the result of being born different. It is the result of training the nervous system to persist, adapt, and execute under pressure. Dopamine is not just pleasure. It is the molecule of pursuit. It is the divine spark placed within the human nervous system to move forward, to continue, to persist even when the reward is far off. Grit begins here, not in personality, not in temperament, but in the biology of reward prediction. The brain is not motivated by success. It is motivated by the perception of progress. And dopamine is the signal that progress is being made, but when that signal is tied only to the outcome, it becomes fragile. It fades when the result delays. It dies when the path gets hard. That's why the truly resilient, the unshakable, have learned to anchor dopamine not to achievement, but to effort itself. This is the shift that turns a mind from quitting to conquering. When the brain begins to release dopamine in response to action, when the very act of showing up, of trying, of enduring, becomes its own reward, the entire system changes. What was once painful becomes purposeful. What was once resistance becomes the call to rise, and this is not abstract, it is chemistry. It is the shaping of neural circuits through repetition. When you begin to tell your nervous system that effort is the win, the brain listens. When you praise the process more than the product, the brain rewires. Synapses strengthen, patterns deepen, and grit becomes not a choice, but a reflex. The ancient paths of discipline were not built around applause. They were built around obedience, around fasting, silence, labor, prayer, not because they led quickly to results, but because they trained the soul to love the process. And now neuroscience is catching up. Dopamine is not highest at the finish line. It peaks when the mind senses it is on the right path. When the internal system says, keep going, you are being reshaped. That's why the warriors smiled in the storm, why the prophets spoke without outcome, why the disciplined rise before the sun, because the act itself is transformation. Because the fire is the altar where weakness is burned and perseverance is born, but the system must be trained. The mind that constantly chases external rewards, likes, money, validation, teaches its dopamine circuitry to depend on outcomes it cannot fully control. And when those outcomes fail to arrive, the drive collapses. But when the mind trains itself to feel victory in every act of persistence, in every rep, every page, every moment of resistance overcome, then dopamine flows regardless of result. The pursuit becomes the prize, and the nervous system becomes unbreakable. You do not need to feel inspired to begin. You need to teach the brain to crave the action itself. You need to fast from comfort, to detach from shallow rewards, to retrain the dopamine system to recognize the sacred nature of grit. Every time you press forward without immediate payoff, you are writing a new pattern into the brain. You are proving to your system that effort is worthy of reward, and in doing so, you become free, not from fatigue, but from the need to be rescued from it. You no longer wait for conditions to align. You generate the drive from within. You activate the biology of perseverance, and you walk into the storm, knowing the fire is the path, and the path is the transformation. The prefrontal cortex is the sacred seat of strategy, vision, and command. It is the part of the brain that holds the image of who you are becoming when your body wants to return to who you've been. It is not a passive observer. It is the battleground for self-control, and grit lives or dies in its strength. This region is what allows you to delay gratification, to suppress impulse, to stay fixed on a goal when emotion, fatigue, and fear scream to quit. But the prefrontal cortex does not come online automatically in moments of stress. It must be trained. It must be called into action. It must be forged in fire. When you face discomfort, the limbic system rises first. It is ancient. It is powerful. It wants relief. It floods your system with the command to escape, to stop the workout, to walk away from the challenge, to silence the voice that says, keep going. And if the prefrontal cortex is weak, that emotional wave crashes through your system like a flood. But when you strengthen it, when you practice overriding impulse, when you discipline yourself to continue despite the emotional storm, you wire new connections. You teach the brain to hold the line. This is where faith and neuroscience meet. In Scripture, endurance is always tied to vision, looking beyond the now, fixing your eyes on the unseen. That is not poetry, that is the prefrontal cortex, that is biology. When you engage this part of the brain, you project forward. You hold the long game. You lift your eyes from the pain of the present and lock them on the reward of perseverance. You move from being ruled by feelings to being led by vision. This is not cold logic. It is holy resolve. Training this command center is not done in silence. It is done in stress. Every time you feel the urge to quit and choose instead to take one more rep, one more breath, one more step, you are strengthening the circuitry that controls behavior under pressure. And the beauty is this, it gets stronger with use. Neuroplasticity obeys repetition. The prefrontal cortex, like a muscle, grows more efficient the more it is recruited. You are not stuck with the level of self-control you have today. You can build more, but it will not come through comfort. It will come through collision when your desire to stop meets the voice inside that says, stand firm, when your emotions scream and you answer with action, when your old identity rises and you override it with your future calling. That is the fire that activates the prefrontal cortex. That is how grit is installed at the level of neural circuits. You are not weak because you feel like quitting. You are powerful when you act anyway, and every time you do, you remind your brain, this body does not rule me, this fear does not own me, this fatigue does not define me. I choose what I become, I lead this system, I train this mind, I override the noise because I was built for more. Controlled stress is the forge of mental endurance. The brain does not grow strong in safety, it grows strong under pressure, when resistance is applied in just the right amount to trigger adaptation without collapse. This is how your nervous system was designed, to respond to challenge, to stretch under weight, to break old limitations and build new capacity through deliberate exposure to difficulty. Stress in itself is not the enemy. Disordered, unmanaged stress is, but controlled stress harnessed with intention, faced with structure, met with breath and resolve, is a sacred tool. It is the environment where grit is born, not through crisis, but through training. The ancient warriors understood this before science ever confirmed it. They practiced pain, not to suffer, but to overcome. They fasted, trained, stayed in the cold, bore the silence not because they loved discomfort, but because they loved what discomfort created. And now the research affirms what the spirit already knew. When you expose your nervous system to calculated adversity, the brain responds by reinforcing the circuits of resilience. You become less reactive, your threshold for discomfort rises, and what once overwhelmed you becomes manageable, even fuel. This is stress inoculation not as a metaphor, but as a biological process of building capacity. Cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, these chemicals surge in moments of strain. They increase alertness, readiness, and focus. But if left unchecked, they can trigger panic and freeze. The key is not to avoid the surge, but to meet it with control, to step into the discomfort and pair it with breath, posture, and presence. This is where your brain learns we are safe under pressure. We do not break when the heat rises, we sharpen. And this message gets written into the architecture of the mind, not through theory, but through exposure. Through choosing friction daily until friction becomes familiar. You train grit when you stay inside the tension and decide not to retreat. When you put the weight on your back and feel your body shake, and you keep going anyway, when you push beyond the first wave of resistance and find out there is more inside you than you thought. The nervous system remembers those moments, it encodes them, it adapts, and the next time pressure rises, it draws from that memory not of quitting, but of conquering. You don't just believe you're resilient, you know it in your biology, you've proven it through experience. Grit is not waiting for life to test you, it is testing yourself so life cannot shake you. Controlled stress is the preparation for battle. It is the classroom of the strong. It is the fire through which weakness is burned, through which doubt is exposed, through which the mind is conditioned to move forward even when the body says stop. When you embrace controlled adversity, you stop running from difficulty and start using it. You train your brain to find strength in the storm, to feel clarity in the chaos, to stand firm when the ground shakes. Because true mental toughness is not born in ease, it is earned in the furnace. Interoception is the ability to sense the internal state of your body, your heartbeat, your breathing, your muscle tension, your hunger, your fatigue. It is the language your body speaks to your brain, the constant stream of day, telling you how you feel and what you should do next. And most people are ruled by it without even knowing it. A fast heartbeat means anxiety, so they stop. Shallow breath means panic, so they retreat. Muscle fatigue means weakness, so they quit. But grit begins when you reinterpret those signals, not as warnings to flee, but as invitations to fight. The nervous system can be trained to respond to discomfort, not as danger, but as activation. And that training starts with listening differently. Every time your heart pounds under pressure, your brain reads that input and looks for meaning. If you believe it means you're unsafe, your body spirals into survival mode. But if you train yourself to see that signal as readiness, as your system mobilizing energy for battle, you change the entire outcome. The same sensation that once triggered doubt now ignites power. You move from reacting to responding. From avoiding to advancing. The interpretation of internal signals is not fixed. It is shaped by repetition, intention, and belief. This is the key to enduring hardship without collapse. The warrior does not silence discomfort. He studies it. The prophet does not escape pain. He walks into it with awareness. The builder does not fear fatigue. He recognizes it as proof that growth is happening. Interoception is not just a tool for awareness. It is a tool for control. When you become fluent in your own physiology, you stop being dominated by surface reactions. You learn to feel the tremble and keep moving. You feel the burn and keep lifting. You feel the resistance and lean in. Because the body may speak, but the mind decides how to answer. The beautiful truth is that every experience of internal struggle is an opportunity to rewrite the code. When your legs shake, you can frame it as failure, or you can frame it as the nervous system recalibrating under load. When your breath shortens in discomfort, you can panic, or you can slow it deliberately, signaling your brain that you are in control. The more you practice this shift, the faster it becomes automatic. You no longer need to convince yourself in the moment. The reflex is already there. The signal no longer means stop. It means go. It means rise. It means now. This is where grit becomes instinct, not because you shut off emotion, but because you train your brain to assign different meaning to emotion. You reclaim ownership of your internal world. You stop outsourcing your direction to temporary feelings. You listen with precision, but you act with purpose, because the signals were never the enemy. It was the story you told yourself about them. And now, with practice, with reverence, with repetition, you write a new story, one where discomfort does not mean danger. It means destiny. It means that you are in the exact place where transformation begins. Breath and vision are the fastest, most powerful tools you possess to shift your state under pressure. They are not soft skills. They are biological levers hardwired into your nervous system to help you take command in moments of chaos. When your heart is racing, when your thoughts are spiraling, when your body wants to quit, your breath and your eyes can pull you out of the storm. They do not rely on emotion. They do not need motivation. They work because they are direct inputs into the machinery of your brain. And when you learn to use them with precision, you stop being a passenger in your own biology and become its commander. The way you breathe tells your brain what to feel. A rapid, shallow breath is the language of panic. It tells the system we're not safe, slow everything down, pull back. But when you take control of your breath, When you use deep inhales, longer exhales, or the physiological sigh, you send a different signal. You tell your nervous system, we are in control, we are staying in the fight, we are not backing down. This is not just calming, it is rewiring. You are training the body to obey the mission, not the mood. Every breath becomes a declaration that fear does not lead here. Vision is equally powerful. The direction of your gaze is the steering wheel of your attention. When you narrow your vision and focus on a specific point, you trigger systems in the brain that sharpen your attention, boost acetylcholine, and suppress distraction. This is the visual tunnel that warriors enter when the battle begins. It is not a flaw, it is design. It exists so that your mind can give full energy to the task at hand. When you widen your gaze, expanding your visual field, you downshift the nervous system. You activate calm, broaden perspective, and reset emotional charge. You were given both tools because you need both modes, intensity and recovery, sharpness and stillness. In moments of extreme stress, the undisciplined brain spirals, but the trained mind turns to breathe and sight. Because those are the switches that flip the nervous system from disorder to direction. This is why sacred traditions across cultures have always included breath and gaze in prayer, in fasting, in battle. Because these tools are not new, they are ancient. They are evidence that your body was made to overcome. That your biology carries the imprint of resilience, that you were designed with weapons, not just feelings. You do not have to wait for grit to appear. You can create the conditions where grit is activated. A single breath, properly taken, can halt the cascade of fear. A single point of focus, deliberately chosen, can anchor your mind in the middle of noise. These are not small things. These are how warriors think, how prophets endure, how the disciplined keep walking when everything in them wants to sit down. Breath is the rhythm of endurance. Vision is the focus of execution. And when you master both, you become unshakable, not because the pressure is gone, but because you now know how to walk through it without losing yourself. Grit is not forged in endless motion. It is sealed in recovery. The nervous system cannot sustain high performance without restoration. Just as steel is tempered by both fire and cooling, the brain is shaped by both challenge and rest. Sleep, deep rest, and stillness are not escapes from growth. They are the conditions in which growth becomes permanent. This is where the circuitry of resilience, built through effort and friction, gets locked in. This is where transformation moves from intention to identity. Your biology demands recovery not as weakness, but as part of the divine design for enduring strength. Sleep is the foundation. It is not passive. It is one of the most active states for the brain, where the lessons of the day are sorted, strengthened, and stored. During slow, wave sleep, the very circuits that were stretched during strain are reinforced. Synapses that were fired in hardship are either discarded or deeply embedded, depending on repetition and necessity. This is neuroplasticity at work, and without sleep, the system remains unstable. The prefrontal cortex weakens. Dopamine systems falter. Emotional regulation disappears. The same brain that stood strong under pressure now crumbles at minor resistance. All because the recovery cycle was broken. Stillness, moments of deliberate pause, silence, and disengagement from input, is equally critical. It allows the parasympathetic nervous system to engage. It slows heart rate, lowers cortisol, and activates systems responsible for reflection and recalibration. In stillness, the brain integrates, it aligns. The thoughts that were swirling begin to settle, like sediment in a storm now finding the ground. This is not optional for the high performer. This is command. The mind that is never still becomes scattered. But the mind that learns to stop, to listen, to enter silence with intention, becomes sharp beyond reason. Recovery also includes deliberate nonce, leap deep rest, practices like yoga nidra, breath, led meditation, and structured downtime. These moments of non-reactive presence replenish dopamine, repair fatigue, and restore motivation at a neurochemical level. The system resets not in laziness but in obedience to its design. The warrior does not train all day. He recovers because tomorrow's battle is real. The builder does not lift endlessly. He rests because what he builds must last. And the mind trained in grit is not afraid to pause. It knows that rest is preparation for more. Light also matters. Morning light, viewed shortly after waking, anchors your circadian rhythm. It regulates cortisol, stabilizes energy levels, and enhances sleep quality that night. The nervous system is tied to the light, dark cycle by divine architecture, and if ignored, the entire system falters. Grit fades when fatigue becomes chronic. Endurance fades when systems don't reset. You cannot override biology with willpower alone. You must honor the rhythm that builds strength. The brain that won't quit is not always the brain that goes fastest. It is the brain that knows when to go and when to be still, that understands that true toughness is not just how hard you push, but how well you recover. Because it is in the rest where the fire becomes sustainable, where the wiring becomes permanent, where the next level of strength is born in the quiet before the next storm.